Well, hello there, you're watching the press preview. A first look then at what is on the front pages. Time to see what's making the headlines with the Daily Mail's consultant editor, Andrew Pearce, and the Daily Mirror's associate editor, Kevin Maguire. Welcome and great to see both of you on another busy day, has to be said. So let's kick off with the front pages then, as ever. And remarking on the decision to drop Plan B COVID restrictions in England, the Metro splashes with return to the office. Turning to Westminster and the ongoing fallout from parties in Downing Street, the Eye declares Johnson clings onto power for now. The Telegraph understands he won't resign, even if a no-confidence vote is called. The Sun takes the so-called pork pie plot to the next level. The Star says the Prime Minister is still refusing to do the right thing, according to the paper, and resign. At the local level, the Bury Times reports on the defection of their MP, Christian Wakeford, from the Tories to Labour. The Financial Times suggests Mr Wakeford's crossing the floor has actually had the effect of rallying Conservative MPs to the Prime Minister's side. Conversely, The Guardian quotes the former Cabinet Minister, David Davis, telling Mr Johnson, "In the name of God, go." Well, The Express says allies of Mr Johnson are rallying to his defence. Well, a reminder that by scanning the QR code that you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. Or them, to be fair. Andrew Pearce and Kevin Maguire, let's bring you in then. Well, what a day, as the Speaker said, Andrew. I suppose let's start with the PM. Is he more or less secure after what we saw today?
Well, it was the most extraordinary day of high drama. It really was. And it's why politics is so unpredictable. Look, we thought there was going to be an awful lot of letters going in from this 2019 intake, the so-called pork pie plotters. It didn't happen. They didn't materialise. And then, ironically, I think the defection, I think the FT's got it right, the defection of Christian Wakeford, as he's been nicknamed by his former Tory colleagues, backfired in a sense that, OK, it was a good bit of theatre for the Labour Party, but actually it reminded Tory MPs who the enemy is, not Boris Johnson, the Labour Party, and it galvanised opinion on the Prime Minister's side. And he's not particularly popular, this MP anyway. And actually, defections, they're just horrible, aren't they? Because it's treachery. All the people who've worked so hard to get you elected, the people in your constituency office, and that's how you treat them. You betray them. And he's betrayed the voters who supported him too in the general election just 2 years ago. And it won't end well. And I imagine some of his colleagues, such as Angela Rayner, are going to take a rather dim view of some of the things he said about her and the Labour Party just a few weeks ago when he was still happily in the bosom of the Tory party.
Well, The Guardian's picked up on that, and also that really dramatic moment that David Davis stood up and quoted, we were all told, Leo Amery talking to Chamberlain in the Norway debate just before he was replaced by Churchill. Something, of course, that Boris Johnson knows only too well because he wrote a book on Churchill, although he then said he didn't know what he was referring to, of course. But that was real high drama, wasn't it, in the Commons, Kevin?
Oh, it was. And I think it edged the defection of Christian Wakeford. And incidentally, I always believe MPs who defect from a party should automatically have to fight a by-election. But David Davis,
well, so does he apparently. Didn't he co-sign a bill on that? But anyway, do continue.
Yes. Yeah. Well, if we talk about Christian Wakeford, he says, look, I'm a centrist politician. He's really saying he's not changed. Labour has changed, got nearer him, while Johnson and the Conservatives are going further away on universal credit cuts and free school meals. We could discuss it endlessly, but I thought the moment was David Davis, incredibly powerful intervention by him, given that he's been a Boris Johnson supporter in the past. He's incredibly independent-minded, David Davis. I think he's a Conservative of principle. There's been many issues I've agreed with him on, including during the Labour era, when he was against extending detention without charge to 90 days. He's very principled, but for him to stand up like that, he will be reflecting what a lot of other Conservatives actually think privately, but wouldn't say quite so publicly or as robustly as he did. We don't know how many letters have gone in. Clearly, it's not 54 yet. I suppose Christian Wakeford is now taken out, probably doesn't count. But the Prime Minister might have survived the day, but this is what we're talking about. We're talking about him surviving a day, and somehow that is wonderful. I think he's kind of like the condemned man on his way to the scaffold who's just stopped to take a little look at the sunshine before he's walked on again. I think all these fundamental problems are absolutely still there.
We are old enough, sadly, to remember that in any leadership contest, David Davis would normally throw his name into the ring, but maybe no more. Let's go to the Daily Telegraph then, Andrew. And the idea here, with the quote that Johnson says, "I won't quit if Rebels force a vote," he only needs a simple majority. We just remind ourselves what happened with Theresa May, don't we? He just needs to get halfway.
Exactly. Theresa May fought the leadership. Then there was a confidence vote against her. She contested it. She won. She didn't have an enormous majority, but she had enough, and she limped on. And I think she survived for another 6 months. Boris will. I think if there was a confidence vote next week, and I don't think there will be, by the way, we're expecting the Sue Gray report around Wednesday next week. I think possibly Thursday. It might slip. I think my own hunch is, from talking to MPs, talking to ministers, he's been shored up in the last 24 hours, perversely. I think he'll go through. I think then that there'll be an assessment when we see what happens with the local elections. But don't underestimate how popular what he's announced today, getting rid of Plan B, is. That's going to make a big difference to Tory mood and morale. It's going to cheer people up throughout the country. And it's a sign we are finally getting out of this wretched pandemic, and we're coming out of it a lot quicker than a lot of countries in Europe. So I think he'll be there right through to the local elections. That's my hunch. And then who knows after that? And as we've said before about Boris Johnson...
Hold on. You mean the May elections, not the next general election,
yeah.
right? Just
May local elections, yeah. And no, sorry, forgive me, May. And people have written off Boris before, and they've said it's all over. I wouldn't write him off at all. I think he's a great survivor. He's a great escapologist, and that the red meat that he's announced, Operation Red Meat, has gone down pretty well with some backbenchers. So they're still fighting him. And actually, bizarrely today in House of Commons, I like that appalling interview with Beth Rigby yesterday, which was the trigger for David Davis's intervention because he thought it was so awful. I thought he performed very well in the Commons today.
It's interesting, though, Anna, that Andrew said it's gone down well with Tory backbenchers. That's what it's all about. He's now fighting a Tory civil war. It's all about the country as a whole. We know, for instance, the idea of having the military somehow stemming the flow of small boats was just PR. One, the Royal Navy have been involved for several years. And two, what does he expect them to do? Shell France, torpedo dinghies. They'll be rescuing people in boats. That's what sailors do when they're at sea. They see somebody in peril, they rescue them. It's all about fighting. I thought he'd go by the end of the year, because we saw inflation is up to 5.4%. Energy bills are going to go through the roof. Not entirely his fault, although he could do more to bring them down or bring that increase down. He's going to put up national insurance in April when prices are going to be far outpacing average earnings, so living standards are going to be squeezed. Then he'll have the May elections, and this is before we even consider Sue Gray's report, which may be the end of next week. And I think there's something just changed in the mood, the political mood. I think it started with these ridiculous and suicidal defence of Owen Paterson and Sleaze. And it's gone on through hiding the truth about parties. And the Telegraph says, well, if there's a vote, he'll fight on. Well, who thought he wasn't going to fight on? The Telegraph had a great story about the parties in Downing Street on the eve of the Duke of Edinburgh's funeral. Incredible, breathtaking revelation that. But he won't quit if the rebels force a vote. Of course he won't quit. And even if he wins it, he could be mortally wounded because, yes, Theresa May did win hers. I think from memory the vote was 200 to 111. But there was a revolt in the Conservative Association. None of the problems were fixed, and she was gone. She survived the vote in December. She was gone the following July. Yeah, Boris Johnson, whatever magic he had, it's gone. He ain't coming back. He ain't coming back. He's lost it.
You've brought up the cost of living, and you know, many people suggesting that the Tory party is fixated on parties at the moment and masks, or in fact, I suppose the nation is, when actually we're all going to lose effectively 10% of our income come April. It's going to be extraordinary what happens then to people's incomes, and the focus needs to be... So someone like Anne Widdecombe, for example, came out today and said, now is not the time to get rid of a leader, now is the time to buckle up and sort this out. The FT too, Andrew suggesting he's bought more time, and certainly a number of the 2019ers, as they called themselves, came out to speak to our deputy political editor in the lobby, really backing Boris Johnson today. I mean, was that also coordinated a bit like the, you know, 20 or so who pork pie plotters?
Well, it was. No, but hang on. I think Boris Johnson's team have fought back. I think they were asleep at the wheel yesterday when he gave that pretty poor interview to Beth Rigby. But they've come out fighting today. He was much better in the Commons today. The defection, actually, pure theatre for Labour, but nobody likes defectors. There'll be a lot of Labour MPs on those Labour benches won't like the idea of that bloke being on their side. I can tell you. So I think you've got to give credit where it's due. The Prime Minister had a better day today, and people I talked to said some Tory MPs actually took their letters back from the chairman of the 1922 when they saw the defection.
We were told that as well. Have you got? I mean, has anybody actually confirmed any names or numbers on that?
No, because Graham Brady never tells anybody anything. He never leaks, unfortunately.
No, but it is Tory whips and loyalist MPs asserting what has not been proved. Until somebody is produced who says, I'm a Conservative MP, I put in my letter, I have now withdrawn it, I won't believe it. It's just false propaganda, another smokescreen, another attempt...
You don't know that, Kevin. You don't know that. You don't know that. You don't
name
know
somebody.
That. I heard it from pretty good sources. Good sources.
Did they name anybody to you? No, they didn't. Why? Don't be gullible. Don't swallow it. Until you get somebody, it is just another tactic to shore up Boris Johnson. If you produce somebody, I'll acknowledge it. Kevin,
we were told 20 of the 2019 people were going to put in letters today. They didn't do it. So there's a lot of black propaganda on both sides. I think probably some Tory MPs did withdraw their letters because they did not like that defection one bit.
OK,
you can't name one.
On that very defection, let's just show people the Bury Times as we move through into the break. MP rocks Boris by switching sides. The mask certainly drew a rather snidey tweet from Nadine Dorries, and Momentum and Young Labour both not entirely being enthusiastic about that. But we will save that for after the break, if you don't mind, Kevin.
OK.
I was waiting for him to say something, as you could tell. Anyway, coming up, we've talked about it already, but a return to COVID Plan A. Is it the right move? More in just a moment. Well, welcome back. You're watching the press preview with me now, and news, of course, is the COVID restrictions signified today by both Boris Johnson and the Health Secretary that they will go, large parts of them, Kevin, including, as the Metro points out, return to the office, because these are one of the newspapers that get picked up by the office workers.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The Metro will be pleased about that, people going to work. On a day that 359 deaths were announced, the end of COVID restrictions in England were also announced. British Medical Association warning that COVID could rebound and come back rather fiercely because of this. But most people have been going to work as usual anyway. It's because even at the height of the first lockdown, when number 10 was at Party Central, I think it was only 1 in 4 people were working from home. And if you drive a bus, a taxi, a lorry, you work in a factory, a warehouse, you're in a shop, whatever, you'll be going to work. But office workers going back, that will boost city centres, although some towns and smaller villages might lose out because the people who've been spending their money locally will now be sending it more centrally. But it's a gamble. It might be another gamble that pays off. We've had 170,000 dead. Let's hope that toll doesn't keep mounting by 359 every day. Yeah,
not universally applauded. We saw in the Commons those Tories who wanted restrictions to go seemed to be the ones who stayed behind. But the Daily Telegraph reporting on union anger after masks are scrapped in classrooms. There's been a real clamour from the education unions to keep teachers safe. In primary schools, obviously, no masks and no vaccine, so it's harder there. And the running total is what? 7-day rolling average, 93,000 cases, twice roughly what Delta was. Gamble for you too, Andrew?
No, I think it's long overdue. I'm glad he did it. I'm glad he stuck to his guns before Christmas and didn't go further than Plan B, unlike the Welsh First Minister who was accusing the Prime Minister of being reckless and irresponsible. Well, actually, I think they're now withdrawing the extra restrictions in Wales. Look, I'm sorry the unions are upset in schools, but the fact is we know that Omicron is largely, it manifests itself as a cold, and often a mild cold. You don't need to close down schools for a mild cold. And if teachers want to carry on wearing masks, they can. I don't understand all this hand-wringing. Oh, what about masks? Look, wear a mask if you want to. You don't need the government to keep telling you what to do. You can work it out yourself. I'm going to carry on wearing a mask on the tube because I think it's a considerate thing to do to other people, and I don't want people sneezing all over me anyway. So I'm going to carry on, but I don't need the government to tell me I have to carry on.
You have to legally in London, Andrew, because it's going to be a condition of carriage. So on the London
right.
Tube.
Well, I would have anyway.
Oh, I'm really glad to clear that one up before you were wrong side of the rules. In the next part of our programme, we'll talk about self-isolation as well. Indicated that too would go at a time when non-vaccinated medical staff in hospitals would lose their jobs, which is interesting, isn't it? But for the moment, Andrew Pearce, Kevin Maguire, thank you both.